We have got a messy slate to sort through for today for MLB DFS because when you pull up the pitching for tonight's slate, you're going to see that there aren't a lot of definitive options at the top of the tier. We do Walker Buehler, but it's not like Walker Buehler. It's like a dulled down version of Walker Buehler facing the Padres for the second consecutive start. A little bit dicey, to say the least. So we're going to dive in, try to decide what to do with Buehler, try to decide if we have any alternatives, what to do elsewhere at pitcher, and also where we go with our stacks for today. So we're going to do that right now here on the FanDuel Fantasy Live Q&A. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to answer your questions live on air for tonight's MLB DFS slate. No matter what your question may be, talking about tonight's slate, you can get that in over on the FanDuel YouTube page. We are also taking questions via Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. So no matter where you're watching the stream, you can get your question in and get us set for tonight's slate in MLB DFS. I see Michael is already anti-Walker Buehler. He says Tatis is going to rake. Probably a good assumption, given that Fernando Tatis is very good. So a fair assumption, but I still think that Walker Buehler is going to be my top pitcher for today. So Devontae asking what's going on. I think that we were talking on Twitter earlier about the pitchers for today. Devontae, I think we're going to wind up using Walker Buehler as our number one guy for tonight. As you can see here, $9,800 is a salary for Walker Buehler. And the reason I am in on Buehler as my number one pitcher for today has nothing to do with his overall numbers this year. His overall numbers, pretty rough. A 17% strikeout rate. That's not ideal. He's been good from a results perspective, but the peripherals are not what you want for DFS. The reason I am interested in Walker Buehler for today is a change he made in his most recent start. He's facing the Padres, which means it is a back-to-back matchup, which we don't like. We don't like it when the team has just seen that guy. That means they're going to be better tuned up to what he's throwing. We don't like that. But he made a tangible change there. Going to pitch type over on FanGraphs, you can see his cutter usage went way up, his four-seam fastball usage went down, and he threw a couple more curveballs too. If you go to Baseball Savant and check out Walker Buehler's page, you will see that the two pitches on which he got the highest whiff rate last year and this year were his cutter and his curveball. So if that change he made last week to throw more curveballs and more cutters is something that carries over into this week, that's going to say to us, okay, going forward, I think we can expect Walker Buehler to be kind of what he was last year. Now, you'll note, we were on the advanced tab before, he didn't get a lot of strikeouts against the Padres last week. However, he did get a lot of whiffs, a 17.2% swinging strike rate. That's a really big number. So to me, I do think that Walker Buehler is the number one guy for tonight. Very tough matchup, facing the Padres, a very good offense. That does scare me for sure. However, look at this. There aren't a lot of great options available in the pitching pool for today. So it puts me in a tough spot where I would love to be skeptical of Buehler because it is a one-start sample that I'm getting excited about. But I don't have a lot of good options to turn to elsewhere. So Jack asked, do you think it's fine to fade Buehler in a single entry and take some budget guys? And we also had a question from Devontae about Christian Javier. I think those two things actually do go hand in hand because if I'm not going to go with Buehler, Jack, I'm going to go with Christian Javier, who Devontae just brought up. So whatever brought you on Christian Javier, Devontae, I like it. Good process there. Javier, you'll note over here, just 73 and 88 pitches. The 88 for him was back on April 8th. However, he went down to the alternate site, which sometimes can be a red flag because it means the team doesn't value them as highly as a starter. But for the Astros with with Christian Javier, it was just because they didn't need a fifth starter. So I said, okay, we're going to send Javier down to the alternate site, let him pitch there, and have an extra spot in the roster. He did make a start at the alternate site, went 82 pitches in that start. That was a week ago, so he's still fully stretched out. And as you can see here, he does get some strikeouts. This is over, what's the sample here on this? This is over his 12 starts. So 12 starts for Christian Javier in the big leagues, a 26% strikeout rate, 4.23 skill interactive ERA. That strikeout rate, very good. The reason I am not leaping to use Javier over Walker Buehler for today is that the Angels, a tough matchup as well, 111 WRC plus against righties with a 21% strikeout rate. That's not a great matchup. I know Buehler doesn't have a good one either, but I have a higher opinion overall of Buehler than I do of Javier. That's why I still have Buehler number one. However, Jack, I understand if you don't want to go Buehler. You think that, okay, second time facing the Padres once again, it is scary. I get that for sure. So I understand going there, and I think that Javier would be the first place I'd turn. I do want to pull up the betting info for this slate, because it'll give us a good read on whether or not Javier will be a popular option for today. We see Buehler grading out pretty well. Javier's right there. I think that he's probably going to be more popular than Erin Sanchez if I had to guess, but I don't really know. So I don't think you're going to be getting like a massive popularity discount by going with Javier over Buehler. That's why I think for me personally, for a single entry tournament, I would still go Buehler, but you do have leeway to go with Javier if you decide I don't want to use Buehler based on the matchup, based on popularity, whatever it may be. You do have leeway to go elsewhere. Question from Jorge over on Facebook. For cash games, did you go Slater/Alonso or Lindor and Nimmo? Okay, so Alonso is facing Trevor Williams, and Lindor and Nimmo, they're both facing Williams as well. So, Jorge, I would say that depends on what you're doing from a stacking perspective. I would go with whatever fits your stacks better, because they're both fine. I think both those combinations are totally okay. I do like Austin Slater a pretty good amount, so in a vacuum, I might wind up going there. I think the matchup for him is pretty good, should put a lot of balls in play. So in a vacuum, if I'm not accounting for stacks, I would say the Slater-Alonso combination grades out better. But if you are considering stacks, like if you have two other Mets in your lineup, you can afford to go with Lindor and Nimmo, I'd probably lean that way. So Jorge, both options work pretty well. I would base it on what other stacks you have in there. Mateo, I like the Cubs offense, but which one hitter do you like? Between 6, 7, and 8, the lineup is up. Thank you for letting me know that. That does help quite a bit. Okay, so 6, 7, 8. We're facing a lefty and Joey Lucchesi. I'm not super jazzed about facing Lucchesi because I think he's a decently good pitcher, so a little bit worried about that. But 6, 7, 8 is Matt Duffy. Welcome back, Matt Duffy. We got David Bodie and Jake Marisnick. Marisnick's actually not terrible against lefties. I know that's he's not super well known as being a guy who's in play for DFS, but he has some power. I remember using him a couple times with the Astros when they would be facing lefties, just as like a salary saving type guy. Let's pull up the numbers here for the Cubs versus lefties. This will be a small sample for all these guys. Actually, for Matt Duffy, he's barely played because he's been, I think, he's had Achilles injuries, just everything has happened to this guy. Bodie against lefties, a 37% hard hit rate, 29% fly ball rate, 200 ISO. That's not terrible. Marisnick, okay numbers there as well. Let's pull up Marisnick's numbers going back a bit deeper. I'm probably going to wind up favoring Bodie, but I figure we can go through this just for funsies. Pull up the splits here for Marisnick. We're going to go versus lefties and see what we have here for a larger sample for Marisnick. So the biggest season will be back in 2019, 196 ISO. That's not too bad. 28% hard hit rate, 39% fly ball rate, a lot of strikeouts. Not super into Marisnick. I'm probably going to wind up going Bodie there just because I think that there is a pathway to some power. Believe he was the guy hitting 6th if we pull this back up. Oh, he's hitting 7th. Okay. So Bodie's $2,400. I'd lean there personally. I do want to dig into Matt Duffy, though, to see what he's been doing since he came back. I know it's been a hot second since we've gotten to see Matt Duffy in the big leagues, but he's still 30 years old. I thought he was old, man. Okay. All right. I would have taken the over on that, but I guess not. He's only had 18 plate appearances. Okay, contact, So I think that Duffy or Bodie is fine, Mateo. I'm not jumping out of my seat to use either guy personally, but I do think that if I had to choose, I'd probably go Bodie just because we've seen Bodie be relevant over a larger sample, but Duffy works too. If you need that $400 savings, that's okay. Okay, Michael, what are your thoughts about the thought of moving the mound back 1 foot? I like strikeouts because I play DFS. So the further you move the mound back, the fewer strikeouts we get. So I'm against it. I know that that's a contrarian opinion because people like to see balls in play, like doubles and singles. I don't care. I want dingers and I want strikeouts. And the mound where it is leads to both. So I would be against it. I don't really care enough to throw a fit about it, but not super into it. Where does Alex Cobb rank in popularity? I would guess he's not going to be super high. Cobb has some very interesting numbers in his first 2 starts this year. Let's pull these up over here. It's a small sample, and he didn't have strikeouts in the past. So he's kind of like Jacob Junis was yesterday, and Jacob Junis did not fare well. So, kind of what we were talking about yesterday, where it's a wide range of outcomes, but within that range of outcomes are some good possibilities. 35% strikeout rate, 19.1% swinging striker for Alex Cobb so far this year. And the reason that I'm not going to totally write that off is there have been some changes for him in his pitch mix. He's using his splitter more often, and he's using fewer sinkers. We always love to see that. Couple more curveballs as well, and the velocity up on that curveball, the highest it has been. So I'm not going to write it totally off for Cobb and say that this is not legit and say it's not going to happen. So I think you could talk yourself into Cobb. I'm not going to get there personally because the Astros don't strike out that much. I'm still skeptical that what Cobb is doing pans out. I feel better about Javier, feel better about potentially Erin Sanchez too. So I'm not going to get there personally, and I would bet that he's not very popular. So if you're looking for an under the radar option, maybe Cobb works there, but not someone I'm super itchy to use. Best stack for tonight from Devontae. Boston seems like the sure lock, but they disappointed last game. I wouldn't call them a sure lock. And the reason I hesitate to do that is because these two numbers right here, the strikeout rate and the walk rate on Justin Dunn. Justin Dunn, I think, is doing this intentionally. And he might be very smart. He might be doing this intentionally, limiting the balls in play, because we see a lot of hitters optimizing launch angle. We see them doing these smart things to get better contact when they do make contact. So what Dunn potentially is doing intentionally is increasing his walk rate, getting a lot of strikeouts, and it makes sense. He's allowing a lot of hard contact. So I think it might be intentional, honestly. And if it is, kudos to him. He's thinking different. So I could see him doing this on purpose. But if you add up these two numbers, the strikeout rate and the walk rate, you get about 45%, which means that he's letting up a ball in play 55% of the time. That's a relatively low number, and it is a turnoff for me for stacking. I do still have Boston ranked as my number one stack because stacking is also kind of weird for today. However, I can't call them a surefire bet. So if we get the read that the Red Sox are going to be the most popular option for today, that would worry me with them, and I would feel a lot of leeway to go elsewhere with my stacks just because I don't think that they're a stack that will definitively come through. They're a good offense, 110 WRC plus against righties since the start of last year, hitting the ball well so far this year. Temperature's pretty low. It's another reason to potentially deviate elsewhere. So I think that the Red Sox are good. I would not say they are definitively the top stack. I do have them first, but there's a lot of leeway to go elsewhere if you get the read that the Red Sox will be popular. So Sports Junkie did ask if there were any chalky stacks for today. So let's pull up the heat map here and check out the implied totals. Again, the heat map is available for numberFire premium users, but I'm giving it away here because I feel like it, and I feel like no one will probably notice. But the Red Sox, 5.28 implied total. That is the highest in the slate. So if I were to say Team X will be chalk, the Red Sox would be that team. So we were talking before about Walker Buehler versus the field for a single entry tournament. I would be more inclined to go Walker Buehler as my pitcher and then go elsewhere with my hitters for today, just because the Red Sox do shape up to be most likely the most popular option, and I can poke holes in them from a stacking perspective. Again, they are my first stack overall, but they're not a perfect stack. So I would say Boston will probably be the chalk stack. I have reason to be a little bit skeptical of them. So if I were mapping out a way to play things for single entry, I would say Walker Buehler and then not using the Red Sox as a stack. Alvin did ask favorite Red Sox bats. Again, I like them. I think that they're a good option for today. The good thing with them is that Justin Dunn, he doesn't issue as many walks to righties, so you can use righties. He lets up more power to lefties, so you can use both righties and lefties. So honestly, anybody 1 through 5, Alvin, grades out really well for me. The good thing is, with Walker Buehler being the salary that he is, you can afford every Red Sox batter. I'm pretty sure you can get to JD Martinez too, especially because my second stack most likely is going to be a lower salary one. I'm going to go with Kike Hernandez because low salary, bat and leadoff. Good numbers so far this year. I want Rafael Devers in there for the power. Alex Verdugo in there as well because we do get the powers for lefties facing him. And we put Martinez in there. 27.75 may seem like it's not a lot, but honestly, given my second stack might be the Giants, I can make that work. So, Alvin, I would say anybody on the Red Sox, I'd rank these 4 guys the highest personally, but Bogaerts works for sure. If you want someone with a lower salary, I would probably lean Marwin just because he does get the left-hand side versus Dunn. But I think those 4 guys will be the top 4 guys, and I can get to them for sure for today. What's your next best stack after the Red Sox? Okay, so let's say you don't want to go Red Sox. You're not convinced. You're not feeling good about them. My number 2 stack for today, I still think it's the Giants. It's between the Giants and the Dodgers. I think both these teams grade out pretty well from a stacking perspective. The reason that I can't commit to going with the Giants number 1, despite the fact that Daniel Castano lets up a lot of balls in play, is that most of those balls in play are on the ground or not well struck. You can see here, this is a 5-start sample for Castano, a 1.2% barrel rate allowed. He's been very good at limiting hard contact, and he did do pretty well with that in the minors as well. He did a great job against the Giants, this very same team, just last week. The reason I'm still willing to stack the Giants is that they're very good against lefties. Castano will let up a lot of balls in play. They're seeing him for the second consecutive time, and now Castano pitching on the road versus pitching at home. That's why the Giants number 2 from a stacking perspective for today. Dodgers are facing Ryan Weathers, and he just faced them last week, so another duplicate matchup there as well. He's a good prospect, like not a top 100 prospect, but a good prospect. So I think that long-term Weathers is going to be good, and potentially we're not going to be stacking against him for this entire year. But what he does do is he does let up, I think he projects to let up a lot of balls in play. Obviously, if you see the numbers here early on this year, that has not been the case. But I think it was a 7.6% swinging strike rate for him versus the Dodgers last week, 7.6%. Indeed, he's not going to get a ton of ground balls. I mean, it's a higher than average ground ball rate, but not like a Castano level type one. So he's going to let up balls in play. He's going to let up some fly balls as well. That bodes well for the Dodgers, especially because they did just see him last week. So the non-Red Sox stacks I like for today are the Giants and the Dodgers in that order. Again, like if you think the Dodgers are going to be super popular, don't want to go to them, I would go to the Giants. I personally don't get that read. So I would say that's where I'm at there. Erin, is Baez too much on FanDuel? Let's pull up the Cubs lineup over here. I don't think the salary is going to be restrictive for Javier Baez, $3,900, just because like the pitching isn't super high salaried for today. So I don't really need to care as much about salary as I usually would. What I do want to do is dig into Javier Baez's numbers and see what he's done so far this year, because Baez had a really rough year last year. I think he had a grand slam. Was it last night? One of the nights this week, Baez had a big grand slam. It was, last night. So I think he also hit lefty in one of the plate appearances, so that's fun. So far this year, Baez has a 14.7% barrel rate and a 45% strikeout rate. So he's gone full Miguel Sano. That's exciting. But he has some stolen bases. I think that Baez is appropriately salaried given the upside that he possesses. He has 2 sources of upside via the home runs, via the stolen bases. So that means he could go absolutely berserk. That's why you want to pay $3,900 for guys if they have a path to being a legit difference maker on the slate. And Baez has that, as he's shown several times this year. The reason that I'm not like itching to use him is that strikeout rate is very high. Every hitter is high variance. So like I'm not too concerned about high variance, but like Lucchesi can get some strikeouts. He gets a lot of swings and misses. So I think that the Cubs in general, not super high on my list. Sounds like people might be higher on them than I am for today, which is fine. I think that you can make the case for them for sure. I actually don't mind stacking the Mets though. Trevor Williams, a guy who in the past, the past couple of years, didn't get a lot of ground balls. His ground ball rate was hovering around 40%. This year, the ground ball rate has gone up. This is over, I think it's 3 starts this year for Trevor Williams. Yeah, he's throwing more fastballs, both 4-seamers and sinkers. So the 3-start sample for Williams. He has a 4.32 skill interactive ERA, a 20% strikeout rate, an 11% walk rate. Not a ton of hard contact so far. But if we go back to last year on Trevor, I could just, let's just go over here. That's easier than copying and pasting. Whoopsies. I keep clicking the wrong places. Okay. Trevor Williams, look at his numbers last year as well. Now, he's made tangible changes, which is why the data I have on my sheet for Trevor Williams is different than what we see last year. There have been tangible changes, but last year, a 6.18 ERA, 4.84 skill interactive ERA. His expected ERA last year was 5.07. Has he made a big enough difference to become no longer a stacking option? I don't know. I think that it's possible that he has, which is why the Mets are not super high on my stacking list, but I'm not willing to fully say they're out of play because he's had 3 decently good starts. The results haven't been great, but I think he's pitched pretty well in those starts despite the ERA being high. So I'd rather stack the Mets than the Cubs personally. That could be stupid potentially, but I do think that's my preferred way to go for today. Pulling up temperatures here, Wrigley Field, 54 degrees first pitch temperature. That's better than Fenway at least, but it's also not as good as what we have for the Dodgers out west. So I think that for me, I would put the Mets probably 4th. It's still Red Sox 1, but again, I'm kind of wishy-washy on that given they're probably going to be popular. I would go Giants 2, Dodgers 3. See if there are any more lineups out here for any of the West Coast teams. We talked about the Red Sox a bit. Actually, let's see if the Mets are in yet. They are not in either, so nothing yet there. Let's talk about some pitchers here because we talked about Buehler, why I like him. Talked a tiny bit about Javier. Michael loves watching this. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Other option I don't mind is Erin Sanchez, just because it's an opportunity cost thing. Because there aren't a lot of great strikeout pitchers on this slate. Looking at this column here, there's really no one outside of Javier and Buehler who's above 21%. So that means that Erin Sanchez being a lower strikeout pitcher is not as much of a negative for DFS as it would be on most other slates. As a result of that, I feel okay using him here. 3.94 skill interactive ERA in his first 3 starts, low walk rate. He's getting ground balls once again, 4.4% barrel rate allowed. And the Marlins, not a great offense like they've been fine recently, but a 91 WRC plus. They've got a 24% strikeout rate versus righties, not a lot of walks. I think that sets it pretty well. I think you could build the case that Alex Cobb deserves to be above Sanchez because he's gotten strikeouts this year at least. Sanchez has not. So maybe Cobb is the guy who has a more realistic path to a ceiling. The reason I decided to go Sanchez over Cobb is twofold. The first one is that I like the matchup better for Sanchez facing the Marlins, whereas Cobb is facing the Astros. Number 2, it's a better park for pitching because San Francisco is like the worst hitter park on the planet. Outside of, Boston today is colder, so I think that does get downgraded quite a bit, but it's still only 8 degrees warmer in San Francisco. That downgrades things for sure. And the warmest temperature of the slate is where Cobb is pitching. That's a positive for offense more so than pitching. So that's why I wound up putting Sanchez above Cobb. But honestly, you could put Cobb above Sanchez and feel pretty good about it. Personally, I do not. It's why I'm going to go Buehler, Javier, Sanchez, and then Cobb. I probably will not get to Cobb for today. Aaron says don't do it. Fair enough. I think that's the thing. We could say that about every pitcher on today's slate. I could say that about Walker Buehler. He's facing the Padres. 2nd consecutive start. Hasn't looked good so far this year. Don't do it. I get it. You're right. You are right, Aaron. I agree. The problem is I can't say do it to any pitcher on this slate either. There are a lot of risks here. So I get it. I agree with you. Just not the right slate for it. The good thing, if we want to take a little sneak peek at tomorrow, got the next day tab all set, got the sheet ready in case you want to screenshot it. It actually is a pretty good pitching slate for tomorrow. We got Tyler Glasnow. Jacob deGrom seems like he's okay. He decided to push his start back, but it seems like he's okay. And honestly, some lower salary guys who can cook a bit. So today's pitching slate is bad, but somewhere over the rainbow, there is a good slate. That slate happens to be tomorrow. It is going to be a 14-game slate, it looks like. So that'll be a lot better. But yes, I agree, Aaron. Don't do it is my general sentiment around every pitcher for today, even Walker Buehler to an extent, but he will still be my number 1 pitcher for tonight. That is all the time that we have for today here on the FanDuel Fantasy Live Q&A. As mentioned, though, we are back once again tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages, taking your questions live on air. We do it every weekday in the same place, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern to get you set for that day's slate of MLB DFS tomorrow, assuming that I'm not down for the count. We do have the solo shot at 9 a.m. Eastern. We have our NASCAR Heat Check podcast at 10:30 for Talladega. So those will be on YouTube as well. Make sure to subscribe there, but also the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed for all of our DFS podcasts. If you have additional questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes. JIMSANNES. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, interacting, and asking very good questions. Good luck tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the FanDuel Fantasy Q&A.